Hi there, it's Cheryl here from Knitter Matters. I'm coming in just a little early just to make sure that you can hear me. Last week we had some sound issues, not quite sure why, and of course I was desperately trying to fix them, and I'm telling you that I'll start again thinking, of course, that you can hear me. Well, of course you couldn't hear me. I'm really hoping that you can hear me now. That's why I've come in early. So let's hope that is the case. If somebody could just tell me that they can hear me okay, that would be wonderful. So we have a little bit of time before we actually start, but if somebody can let me know, that would be fantastic. Otherwise I will be talking to myself and I won't know any different, which is never a good thing. Oh, Dawn, you rock star, you can hear me. Thank you so much for letting me know. Right, I can feel so much better now. Thank you so much for that, Dawn. I really appreciate that. That's great. I hope you're all well. We've just had a massive rainstorm here in Florida, so hopefully no thunder, but a lot of rain. We're just coming up now to 7. Oh, I feel so much better that you could hear me. That's always scary. Okay, we are bang on 7 o'clock now, so thank you. Welcome indeed to Knitter Matters. This is season 2, episode 28. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me, whether you're watching live or the replay later. I really do appreciate you watching, and I hope you learn from it, from this episode. I'm delighted that you're here. I'm Cheryl Lampard. I'm an image consultant with my company Style Matters International, and two of the passions of my life have been sewing and knitting in particular is what I call my therapy. I love doing it, and it's something I do every day. It really calms me down. I find it just such a soothing thing to do, as I know many of you do as well. I also used to be the proud owner of a yarn store in Brighton, England, and one of the great joys of owning a yarn store is that you get to be able to teach people how to knit, and it's a great joy to be doing that all these decades later, albeit via a different platform. I'm now going to move the camera. This is the bit to look away if it makes you feel a bit queasy. When your names pop up, I will try and say hello, but forgive me if I miss them. And I will, if you have any questions or comments, I will try to get back to you as soon as possible afterwards if I can't actually answer while we're going along. Anyway, I get up now and I'm just going to move the camera. Oh, Bonnie is watching, Nancy's watching, Carl is watching. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Right, let's just swing this down. I do have my computer in the corner so I can see what you're seeing. Anyway, today, this episode is our second part on the topic of blocking. And last week we talked about all the good reasons for blocking, why we do it. If you want a recap on that, then it's season 2, episode 27. You'll find it on the Knitter Matters page, and you'll also find it on our YouTube channel. But just as a quick reminder, blocking is the process of using water, steam, or pressing to give finished knitted pieces their shape and size, as well as evening out any irregularities in the knitting. Now today, I'm going to actually demonstrate 3 blocking methods. I'm going to demonstrate steaming, wet blocking, and spray blocking. Now, steam blocking, this is a wool sample. This is 100% wool. Steam blocking is ideal for wool and animal fibers, cashmere, alpaca, camel hair, kiviut, and cottons and linen. Kiviut, if you're wondering, is the underhair of it's an Alaskan muscat goat. Anyway, it's very fine and it doesn't produce a lot, so it's very rare. It's a wonderful fiber, but it's really quite rare and it's quite expensive because of that. Anyway, so that little noise that you might have heard in the background there is just my iron heating up, and it's just gonna turn itself off in a second, but that's okay. We'll get it back on when we need to use it. So what I'm going to do here is steam block. I'm not steam pressing, I'm steam blocking this little sample. Now, you don't need to pin, and certainly on a sample this size, I won't pin this. But if it's a bigger piece and you feel more comfortable putting some pins in, then please do so. And again, I'll be using these in a minute anyway on something else, but you want to use these stainless steel T-pins. Okay, T-pins are always much better than dressmakers pins or quilters pins because they bend. These won't. And you want to look for the stainless steel ones for obvious reasons. So I'm just going to, I need to stand up for this, so just forgive me while I grab hold of the iron. Okay, it's got to just get to its temperature again. So what I'm going to do here, you do need to be careful that you check the temperature of the iron. Cotton and linen can stand greater temperatures than wools, and I wouldn't recommend this method for synthetics. I know there are knitters who do steam block synthetics, but you do need to be careful with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and I'm sorry if the iron is going to block your view, but basically what I'm going to do is just hover above the piece. You really don't want to place it directly onto the work. That's not what you're trying to do. The important element here is that it's heat and moisture, not the pressure of the iron. So what I'm going to do is give it some shots of steam and sort of hover above it. I can smell it's actually getting steamed now, and that's what I want. So you need to be careful when you touch it because it can be, oof, I'm getting myself a steam facial at the same time here. So you're hovering above. Yeah, one more blast. And I've got this on the wall setting because this is wool. Now, with my fingers, I'm just going to kind of pull it about into shape. This doesn't require a lot of pulling out, this one. I just want to smooth it out a bit. So I'm just going to pretend that I've got my measurements here while the steam is still, you know, permeating through the fibers. And what I'd do, I'd sort of pinch out with my fingers while it's still damp. I'd pinch out with my fingers any eyelets or cables that I wanted to make, you know, more prominent. Let me just give this another whack of steam. And if you don't find it does what you need the first time around, you can always do it again. But this is really all I want to do with this one. I just need to, I'm not trying to flatten the life out of it. I'm really just trying to even it out and open up the design a bit. Okay, and then you can pin it on. If the idea of making steam, you know, steaming your precious knitting, it worries you, it's not a bad idea to put a press cloth over the top and do the same thing. Again, it's much better to be gentle. First off, you can always do it again if you need to. And you do need to take time with your blocking. You spend a lot of time on your knitting, so it makes perfect sense to take time for your blocking. Now, having pinned that out, I would leave that exactly where it is to dry completely. Once it's completely dry, I can then take the pins out. So this is actually what I like about steam blocking, and it's sort of my go-to. You don't need to have a lot of space to do it. Yes, of course, you've got to have enough space to block the pieces of the garment. If it's a garment, or, you know, even if it's a blanket, you can do it bit by bit. But that's the point. You can do bit by bit when you're steam blocking. So it's a really good method to use if you just want to uncurl the knitted edges of your knitting, say, or if it's a particular a piece of a garment, such as a collar or a band that needs blocking and the rest doesn't. So, you know, I haven't blocked the life out of it, and if I decided I wanted to do that again, then I could actually treat it the same way, but just do it again. Now, I would advise with steam blocking, I put that on the sort of midway amount of steam, but you can do a sort of mega shot of steam, but you've got to be absolutely sure that your fibre can stand the heat and the moisture. So as with all these things, it's better to go in sort of softly and then do it again if you need to. So that's the basics of steam blocking, okay? And I really prefer to do that. As I say, it doesn't take up a lot of space. And you can do little bits instead of the whole thing that is wet, say. However, let me move that out the way. There are times when wet blocking is what you need to do. This is a sample. I showed you this one last week, and I showed you different variations of what it looked like off the needles and when it was blocked like this, because this is sort of a type of lace knitting. It's got lots of eyelet holes, and when this is on the needles, when it comes straight off the needles, it's really scrunched up. You really need to block that out, and you want to create these points here. I'm just going to turn that iron off because it's hissing away. Forgive me a second while I turn that off. Okay. Right, so on this one, for this one, I am going to wet block this particular sample. Not this one, I've got one already in my bowl, getting nicely damp or wet really. So when would you use what? Wet blocking? Well, again, you can use for any sort of wool and animal fibers. Again, cashmere, alpaca, camel hair, kiwiut, and cotton and linen as well. But wet blocking allows for the biggest difference in the change of the fabric, in terms of size, the tension and the behavior of it. You must do it gently by hand, because wool and other animal fibers can felt if agitated too much. So you do want to be gentle with it. Now, I have just put these pins. They're not actually pinned to this piece. This is just going to give me an idea of where I need to pin out to. You would use your schematics or a tape measure or a rule to actually, be your guide. But for the sake of expediency, I've just put pins in so that I know where my sample needs to be blocked out. So first off, I'm going to let me just move that out the way for the second. So in this little bowl, I have my hot off the needles piece soaking away, and it's just in some very cool water. And I've also put some Eucalan in. Eucalan is a really nice product. There's also another product called Soak, which I don't have to hand at the moment. Eucalan is wonderful for washing knitted wool knitting garments. You don't have to rinse it. That's the wonderful thing. So, you just put some in the water and you let it sort of sit there. And the beauty of this, you can use other things, of course, when you're washing your knitting. But this is also good for you preparing it for blocking. But the one thing about not having to rinse out any soapiness is that the less handling, the better, the less agitation, the better. So anyway, that's soaking in a solution of cool water. It's been there about 15 minutes. I'm going to just get it out now, squeeze it very gently, move my bowl out the way so that we don't have a disaster with me knocking it over. Then I've got a towel ready and waiting. I'm just going to place it on my towel, and then I'm going to kind of roll that up like a long sausage. Now, if it's a big piece if it's a big item, then you would probably have to, you need a sink and probably an extra pair of hands, because the danger of a larger piece when you're getting it out of the water is that you can stretch it. If you can't grab hold of it all, you can stretch it. So, and I would also, with a very large piece, I would put the towel on a tiled floor, not on a carpet, on a tiled floor or a countertop, anywhere where you've got room to sort of lay it out and roll it up. Now, what I'm doing here just squeezes, it's like a burrito really. You just squeeze out all the excess water into the towel, and there is my piece. Now I'm just going to, it's actually looking pretty good. Now I'm going to get my blocking mat back and I'm going to pin it out to basically the dimensions of where I'd put my pins. And again, you would measure this as I would if this was a piece that I was sort of doing properly, as it were. But again, for the sake of expediency, but you can see it's quite happy to be blocked out. Just a few more pins there in the top. And I'm sort of angling my pins. And you would, you know, you need to spend a little bit of time on your blocking. And, you know, although you don't want to handle it more than necessary, you do have to handle it to pin it out. But you're doing it very gently. You just don't want to rough up the fibers. You don't want to create any more agitation than you need. So let's see if that's about the size of my finished piece here. Yes, it is. So I can let that dry happily, and again, it has to be completely dry, and then I can remove it from the board. Okay, so that's wet blocking. Now, you can, for most things that you can wet block, if you can wet block the fibre, you can probably steam block it. It's really a matter of personal preference. However, I would say anytime you're doing lace knitting or shawls, you know, lacy shawls, they really do benefit from wet blocking, because you need to open out all these eyelets and, you know, the lace work that you've done. You can't really do that in the same way steaming. You need to have it wet and, you know, block it out. And it does take time to block a big shawl, but the results are really worth it, because you can really get the shape. You can open up the lace work, but you do need some time and space to do that. Okay, but it is that, I would say, it is a sort of essential for lace work. You need to use wet blocking for that. Okay, next and last sample that I'm going to show you is a piece of acrylic, and I'm going to spray block it or mist block it. Oh, one thing I should have said, one of the things that you can use to help you if you are wet blocking especially, but any sort of blocking, I have this cloth that is a checkered cloth. It's inch squares. That's really useful to put over my blocking mat and pin out on that. I still need to measure if it's something that's got to be really straight lines, but it's a real help when you can just follow the lines on a woven piece of checkered cloth. Okay, it's a good thing. It'll guide you pretty well. Okay, I should have said that. Anyway, back to this one here. So now, when would you use, let me just see if there's any questions coming in. I can't see them at the moment, but I'll try and answer if there are any. Nope, nobody's got any questions. That's okay. So you'd use this, again, you can use this for Angora, mohair, wool blends, silk, bamboo, tencel, acrylics, nylon and other synthetics. You can also use it for wools as well, but it's about really anything that has to be treated really gently. So silk, certainly acrylics, and a bunch of other synthetics. So, but I would always check the label when you're talking about synthetics, blocking synthetics, always check the label before you block a synthetic. And spraying works best when your knitting doesn't need a lot of stretching or for delicate fibres. And because this is acrylic, we're not going to alter the shape very much, okay? I've already pinned this out onto my little blocking pad. And what I'm going to do now is just spray this. I've got one of these little spray bottles. You could use a smaller one, whatever. I'm just going to spray it. I've got tepid water in there. I'm just going to spray it. I want to make sure. What you can see now is just the moisture sort of beading on the top of it. I want to make sure, I'm not going to saturate it, I just want to make sure that it's damp all the way through. Okay, and that is now damp all the way through. Yeah, I don't want it completely saturated, but it's damp enough for my purposes. And because I've already pinned that out, all I need to do now is, if I choose to, just put another pin that side and that side if I wish to, just to help uncurl those edges. Okay, and then I'm going to let that dry. And that's all you do for spray blocking or mist blocking. That's all you need to do. And you don't need to keep sort of patting it about. Now, again, with an acrylic, I said that they don't change shape much. They don't. But I still like to block an acrylic if I think it needs it, because it does help with those curly edges. And so when you come to seam it up, it's really going to help if those are smoothed out and a bit flatter. Now, spray blocking or mist blocking is the gentlest way of blocking. And I do recommend it if you're not sure what your yarn is, or you don't have the ball band label to hand. I mean, sometimes we have lovely yarns in our stash, or we're given some yarn and we've lost the ball band, or we can't remember what it was. So try this way first on a sample, because you'll have your swatch, of course, especially if you don't remember what the yarn is. Swatch and then use your swatch to block. So you can see this, as I say, it's the most gentle way of blocking. So I do recommend it if you don't know what your yarn is. Now, just to my point about where I said earlier, some knitters block acrylics using heat. I know they do that, and I have done it myself. And the reason that it's done is because it straightens the fibre out a bit more. So you will get a straighter edges, you will get sort of a flatter fibre. However, that's the whole point. Heat straightens out synthetic fibres, especially acrylic. So it's a bit of a balancing act between straightening the fibres to block it in the way that you want and killing them. And I did go into what killing the fibres are last week, but if you missed that, just to recap, if you kill the fibres with too much heat, it means that you've melted very slightly the synthetic fibres. You've melted them very slightly so they've got straighter, but that also means they lose all elasticity. And once you do that, it's permanent. You can't save it. So yes, you can block acrylics with heat. I don't recommend it. I've done it just to try and play with, but I'd be really careful. And if you do want to do that, you absolutely need to do it on a sample first. But this is the safest method to do it. And you're not going to get you're not going to get the same amount of stretching out that you can get with other fibers with an acrylic. It just doesn't, it's the nature of the fiber. It just won't do that. Okay. So sort of in conclusion then, let me bring all these back. In conclusion then, there's no real one way of blocking. You know, you have options. That's the beauty of blocking. You have options. Most wool and animal fibers can be steam blocked or wet blocked. I do prefer the steam blocking to the wet blocking if I can, because I can control it a bit better. But with shawls, I definitely wet block those. Fine lace knitting does need wet blocking, but you can get away with heftier lace knits by steaming those. Now, cotton yarn does benefit from blocking, just really to smooth out any irregularities in the knitting. Sometimes that can't be avoided, and the same is true with linen, really. You can't really avoid the irregularities because there's no real stretch in the yarn. It's a lovely yarn to wear, but there's no stretch in the yarn, so any kind of looser stitches really show up. So blocking is good for cotton knits because it evens them out, but really be careful not to overstretch it, because it doesn't have any muscle memory, if you like. You know, cotton doesn't spring back. So you must pay attention to the fibre. If in doubt, try the gentlest method first. One last question, really, that I'm going to answer. Nobody's asked the question, but I know it comes up, is about, do we block ribbing? Well, you know, if you've got a garment, if you're blocking a piece of a garment and you're wet blocking it, say, you can't really avoid getting the ribbing wet. But if you're steam blocking, yes, you can avoid the ribbing. But I still hover my iron over the ribbing. I don't stretch it out. I kind of, once I've hovered my iron over the ribbing and got steam into it, I let the steam sort of permeate the ribbing, and then I kind of, you know, pinch it in. But what I find with the ribbing, if you sort of steam block it, it kind of blooms a bit. It kind of fills out a bit more, which I like. But what you don't want to do is steam it and then pull it out like that, because then you're going to lose all the spring, and that's the whole purpose of ribbing. If you're wet blocking, of course, this is going to get wet as well. But again, do the same thing. Just sort of, you can pin out the rest and then keep that nicely sort of, you know, condensed in, as it were. Okay, but you don't want to flatten or press your ribbon unless that's part of the design. Otherwise, it will lose the elasticity. And finally, if your item doesn't need blocking, don't block it. You know, if it really doesn't need it, then don't do it. It's not essential. It's a good thing to do if it needs it, but if not, don't. Okay, I'm going to just move the camera back now. Okay, hopefully. Oh, hi, Anne. Hi, Nancy, and hi, Ashley. I've just seen your names pop up. Thank you for joining me. Okay, so Knitting Matters is taking a break for a few weeks as I'm moving to Pennsylvania. My studio is all going to be packed up by this time next week. So although I will still be here next week, I won't have a studio to do it from, and all my stuff will be packed up and loaded onto a truck to make its way up to Pennsylvania. And I'm not expecting that to arrive for a few more days. So we'll certainly be away for a couple of weeks, but be sure that I will, if you follow the Knitting Matters page, I'll be sure to tell you when the next episode will be, and I will look forward to broadcasting, as it were, from my new home in Pennsylvania. So anyway, thank you again so much for joining me. If you want to watch this episode again, it'll be uploaded to the page and to our YouTube channel within 24 hours. And it's season 2, episode 28. In the meantime, while I am away, if you want to let me know any topics, as you can do any time, let me know any topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes. I'll be pleased to cover them for you. Okay, and well, knitting related topics, that is, of course. So as always, this episode and all others are uploaded to the page and our YouTube channel afterwards. So I wish you happy knitting until I see you again, which hopefully will only be in a few more weeks' time. Stay well, stay calm, and stay knitting. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.